Hello and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM News Talk Radio. Well, here we are in the middle of a pandemic, COVID-19, the coronavirus, and we've had a physician that's an infectious disease expert on our radio show in the past. But I thought it would be helpful to actually speak with someone on the front lines of just day in and day out healthcare. And so, Amitha Mundenchira.
Dr. Amitha
Mundenchira. I apologize.
That's okay. It's a mouthful.
General practitioner. Used to specialize in obstetrics. Thank you. But now is doing general practitioner work. Agreed to come on our show tonight and talk about, number one, what we should be doing. How we should be staying healthy, what we should be doing if we have any fears of the infection, if we do have the infection, how we ensure we don't get the infection, and then also about some of the sort of the rumors. And so, Dr. Amitha, thank you so much for joining us this evening on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour.
Well, it's a pleasure, Brian, and hello to all our listeners.
So first of all, what should we be doing? Obviously, you and I are chatting on the internet. So one of the things is physical distance, correct?
Absolutely. That's the number one thing that has to be done at this point, so we do not see a steep increase in the number of cases. Every day we get more information about this virus that causes COVID-19, which has unfortunately become a pandemic.
Yep.
But as far as we have learned from all the cases so far, both from new cases and from the resolved cases, is that staying away from people who are infected will definitely help. And in a lot of the cases, people sometimes don't know they have the virus.
Right.
Because a lot of them do not exhibit the symptoms,
yep,
but they are still shedding it. And that's probably why they can still transmit it. So definitely social distancing.
Right.
And the other simple measures you can take is to regularly wash your hands, sanitize them. Also, keep your hands away from your face, eyes, mouth, because as far as we know, this virus gets transmitted through contact.
Right.
So if there's a sick person who has probably coughed, sneezed, there are droplets in the air that can land on inanimate objects. If you are within 6 feet of this person, it can unfortunately also land on you.
Right. And so then been told to cough or sneeze into our elbow and things like that?
Exactly. So if you have any respiratory symptoms, first of all, you should be isolating.
Right.
Any kind of respiratory symptoms in this day and age, you should be isolating. But if you are around someone...
Virus or any other virus.
Virus or any other virus. But if you are around someone or in public, you should be covering your mouth or cough right into your elbow. And then make sure you're sanitizing, washing your hands, cleaning down surfaces that you have been in contact with, and keeping your hands away from your face.
Right.
These are simple measures in addition to social distancing.
Something like 90 times a minute?
I missed that, Brian. Sorry.
I hear that we touch our face 90 times an hour or something like that?
Yes, even more so. We don't realize it because sometimes it's out of boredom or it's just a natural reaction. A lot of us do that.
Right.
But now we have to be very conscious about where our hand goes.
Right. Okay. And so you mentioned sanitizing surfaces. So let me ask you a couple questions about that. I hear that it can last on some surfaces for 48 hours.
Yes, it can. And we are still learning about how long it can last on different surfaces. Most of the wood, cardboard, stainless steel, it can last days, even days, like hours to even days. So since we don't know how long it lasts on every single surface, it's best to practice cleaning surfaces regularly. If you are coming in from outside and you have touched a surface, clean it down regularly.
Now,
and that's what.
Yeah. With what? Just a regular cleaner, or in China they were spraying things with bleach.
Yes, we need something that has at least bleach or 70% of alcohol in it. We need to kill the virus.
70% of alcohol, you say?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and at least 70% of alcohol. So you different sources will give you solutions that you can probably even make at home. Go for the credible sources like the Ontario Medical Association, CDC, World Health Organization. If you go to their website, they do recommend how you can maybe make use of cleaning solutions that are already at home,
Right.
or maybe you can make something. Because as you've heard in this day and age, unfortunately, we have some people who have been hoarding supplies. So sometimes you're not able to find those sanitizing wipes at your local grocery store. But don't worry about it, because there are some common day-to-day solutions at home that you can probably use, as long as they have some kind of virus killing component in them, which include things like bleach or 70% alcohol. I can talk of one solution that probably you can make at home, as recommended by CDC website, which is a
Okay.
credible source. If you could take 1/3 cup of bleach, dilute it in 16 cups of water, and that becomes a cleaning solution.
Really? 1 cup of bleach, 16 cups of
No, 1/3 cup of
one
bleach,
third cup of bleach and
bleach
16
in
cups of water.
16 cups of water.
Okay.
This is from the CDC.
Okay.
So if you go to credible sources, there are solutions you can probably also make at home. Now, having said that, remember these are very irritating. It can irritate your hands,
Yep.
and if it's aerosolized, it can irritate your mucous membranes and nasal passages. So if you are using them, make sure you have gloves on. And if there's a lot of aerosolization that's going on, make sure you cover your nose and mouth. If you don't have a mask, that's okay. Just cover it with a cloth if you're going to be using these solutions.
Excellent. We're having a great chat with Dr. Amitha.
Mundenchira.
Mundenchira, I apologize, who's a general practitioner, doctor, former obstetrician. Obstetric.
Yes,
I apologize. I'm terrible with the pronunciation.
it's okay.
And a wonderful person. And she's agreed to talk us through a bunch of the issues. And we're going to take a break and come back for more with Dr. Amitha, where I'm going to ask you about some of the things we can do if we think we've got the virus, and then some of the rumors. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM News Talk Radio. We have got a special session tonight with Dr. Amitha. Oh gosh, I've forgotten it already. Mundenchira,
You got it.
who's a general practitioner and a wonderful lady. I've had her on my show before because she's also a musical performer. But today she's not going to talk about music. She's going to talk about COVID-19. So let's presume I'm home and I feel nauseous and I've got the sniffles and I got a headache. Should I go get tested?
No, and not everybody needs to get tested, is the simple answer to it. But now, if we get into details, it all depends on whether you have, first of all, risk factors, which I'll go over in a minute. Number two, if you have some kind of immunocompromised system, and this is usually with people with chronic medical conditions like diabetes, somebody who might have cancer who's on chemotherapy, or people who are older, which is our seniors. Actually, we have actually decreased the age for that. So 50 and over. So yeah, so all these people have to be a little bit more cautious when the symptoms start. So not everybody needs to get tested though. So let's go over risk factor as per the Ontario Medical Association, the WHO, the CDC, in terms of risk factors. So number one would be travel within the last 14 days.
Okay.
Number two
Travel
would
where?
be
Anywhere?
travel anywhere right now, because initially we had certain areas we were thinking people would contract it from, but we have been proven wrong. People coming from even US, and right now from New York especially, we have had a lot of cases that have stemmed from a travel to New York. So in short, travel anywhere outside Canada, or even outside your province. So outside your home zone, if you've traveled anywhere within the last 14 days.
Self-isolate for 14 days.
Yeah, you have to pretty much, it's quarantine. It's just a technicality where uh, if you have no symptoms, quarantine yourself for 14 days. But if you have symptoms, like you said, isolate yourself.
What's the difference between quarantine and isolate?
So it's just a technicality with the definition. So if you have no symptoms, we just say you are quarantined, where you don't have to worry about getting tested, just quarantine 14 days.
Okay.
If you have symptoms and have traveled within the last 14 days, then self-isolate, but also then consider whether you need to be calling your local public health unit, your local doctor's office, or an assessment center to get tested.
Right.
So in terms of testing then, again, the risk factor one is travel within the last 14 days. Second, contact with anybody who has traveled within the last 14 days and have developed symptoms.
Right.
Third is if you have been in contact with somebody who is a probable or a confirmed case of COVID-19.
Right.
Now, we have in the community gone even further, given that we are seeing a lot of cases that are now community transmitted. And we are also, in the region of my practice, added some extra risk factors. So this is based on where I practice out of, which is the Halton region.
Yes.
We have actually added some more criteria to be considered for testing. If you're over the age of 60, I know earlier I mentioned 50, but that's just a general consensus from the different bodies of information. I'm now specifically talking about the Halton region because we have seen cases more so over the age of 60. Also, people who have the immunocompromised system, like chronic medical conditions, or somebody who is going through autoimmune conditions or cancer, or if you're a healthcare worker, or if you're a First Nations individual.
Why First Nations?
Or First Nations, first of all, there have been cases there which is more severe because of the lack of getting proper care.
Really? Okay.
So we have added that extra criteria. And finally, also if you work with seniors, because as we have seen, there has been a lot of deaths in retirement homes, in seniors' homes. So we have added these additional criteria to set up a red flag.
Okay.
So these are some high-risk criteria which would signal probably you should get tested.
And if you're going to go get tested, what's the protocol and the process for that?
So first, call ahead. And
who are you calling? Your doctor?
So public health or your doctor's office. All the doctor's offices now have the information for you as to where you can call about the assessment center, because there are dedicated assessment centers for COVID-19, and it depends on your municipality. So if you are in Halton region, you want to call the Halton Public Health. If you are in the Peel region, you call the Peel Public Health. So call ahead before you just show up there, because that assessment happens on the phone, and you may be one person who may not need that testing, and you may just need that self-isolation for 14 days.
Right.
Because we have seen cases that have self-resolved, and there's about 8 cases, I believe, right now in the province that have self-resolved just from isolation. So first consult with your local authority before you go over to the testing center. But I've mentioned some of the risk criteria which should alert you if you develop some kind of symptoms, alert you that, okay, I'm going to self-isolate myself, but should I be calling public health to get tested?
Other than the risk factors, what are the symptoms that you should be mindful of?
So the most common ones are fever of 38 degrees Celsius or above.
Right.
Cough.
And remind me, what's normal? I always think 90.5.
So if you're looking at the Fahrenheit, it's up to 98.6 Fahrenheit is considered normal.
Okay. And so what would be abnormal in both Fahrenheit and Celsius?
So in Celsius, it would be 38 degrees Celsius and above. And Fahrenheit, that's about 100.4 degree Fahrenheit and above.
Okay.
So as long as, so that's one symptom, that's the fever and or cough, fatigue, trouble breathing, sneezing, sore throat, in some cases, diarrhea. But the most common are fever, cough, trouble breathing.
Now, other than trouble breathing, a lot of those would be the same symptoms with a flu or a cold.
Absolutely. And that's why
Fever.
like,
Allergy.
sorry, I missed, like the allergies. Yeah. That's why we are now doing a lot of intake calls where people are panicking that this might be COVID-19 because it's very similar in terms of symptoms. And that's why, again, we go back to the criteria for getting tested or the risk of COVID-19. I would ask you to go over those criteria and see whether you fit those risk criteria for COVID-19. And if you do, call your public health unit first, because it may just be a regular cold.
Yep.
We are in that season, it could just be allergies. So that's why the authorities are here to be able to guide you better. Sometimes there's a lot of information like that's bombarded on the net, and you get scared because you get one symptom and you're already thinking you have COVID-19 where you have no risk factors for it.
Yeah. Now, so let's say you've got the risk factors and maybe you've got some symptoms and you talk to public health and they say, go get tested. What happens then? What's the process?
So then they go to an assessment center. So the assessment centers are those who are well equipped with the personal protective equipment, as we call it, PPE. And it's at this point through what we call the nasopharyngeal swab. So it's a swab that goes through your nose. It does not hurt.
Through your nose or in your nose?
Sorry, in your nose.
Thank
it goes all the way. Yeah.
Through your nose. You have heard that it is more than uncomfortable. It hurts a little.
It hurts a little, but it's more than pain. It's more a discomfort.
Right. Okay.
If any of you have ever had a throat swab done, it's kind of similar kind of discomfort sensation, but this time it's going in your nose all the way to the back.
And the reason that's where the virus lives, I understand.
Yes, that's where it enters through, it resides there, and then it gets through the rest of the body. And that's why we go back to how we prevent it is we wash our hands, so when we go to our face, it's not getting inhaled through the nostrils.
Right. Okay, some of the other things that I've said is that people have sore eyes or itchy eyes, and that one of the ways the virus enters the body is through the eyes. Is that true?
Yes, any kind of mucous membrane can attract the virus. It's a portal of entry.
And remind us, what are the mucous membranes?
So it's our eyes, the nostrils, our mouth. So any kind of wet surfaces, they're called mucous membranes, where the virus can easily attach.
Right, not the ear.
The outer ear canals are dry, so that's not considered a mucous membrane.
Okay. Yeah. And so you get the test, and then what's the time period to find out the results now? And do you end up getting hospitalized right away, or not until you find out the results?
So first of all, in terms of the turnaround time for results, it depends on which center you go to. And again, it changes on a day-to-day basis. So right now, the turnaround time for people who are at lower risk may be 2 to 3 days. People who are at high risk, especially the healthcare workers, where they need to know the results soon, those people get results within 24 hours even, because that's expedited. So there's a process as to figuring out who needs this test results sooner. As we get more and more assessment centers and more resources in, it'll become a smoother process.
Yeah. Well, I was surprised when on U.S. television, the public health people were talking about 95, 96% of the tests were coming back negative. So obviously a lot of people that are worried, concerned, anxious, whatever, are going and getting the test. They've got symptoms, or they had those those reasons why, because they've been traveling or some other reason, and they probably had a cold or a flu. So a lot of people have symptoms. 95% of the people have symptoms that are taking the test and are coming back negative.
Negative. So that's why now we are being more resourceful in that we really need the test available, first of all, and also turnaround time for people who really need it. Because in a lot of these cases, as I was saying, it can self-resolve and your body can fight it if you have a good immune system and if you self-isolate, and as long as your symptoms are not severe. So the question that you asked, if a test becomes positive, what is the next step?
Yep.
It's not necessarily hospitalization. It's again, depends on the severity of your symptoms and the underlying risk factors. It may be as simple as they ask you to self-isolate at home.
Now, if people are not getting tested because of the reasons that you mentioned, aren't we therefore being misguided in the numbers of cases that we've got? The numbers are not believable that we see on the news every day in and day out.
I agree with you on that one. Yes, there are a lot of COVID-19 cases out there probably that we don't know of because they're not getting tested. But in the end, what is our goal? Our goal is to, as we call, flatten the curve or slow down the progression of this disease. And that in the end comes down to controlling those people who already have the disease so that they don't keep passing it on to others.
But if you have some symptoms, but you're not got severe symptoms and you think you're going to self-resolve at home, you could pass it on. And in fact, aren't people that are asymptomatic passing it on as well? You don't actually have to have the symptoms to be infectious, do you?
No, so there are some people who are not exhibiting the symptoms. There's that 14-day incubation period, and sometimes they don't exhibit the symptoms early on. It might come later on, or they may not have it at all. But again, coming back to if they practice what we already know, which is if you have traveled, quarantine for 14 days, if you develop symptoms, isolate for 14 days, you contain it. So whether you have the COVID-19 or not, in the end, the management becomes the same if they follow those instructions. And isolate doesn't mean, you have like a mini party at home. It means total isolation.
Total isolation.
And total isolation. I had one patient I saw who has a family of 3 children and a wife. He had just returned from the US and he developed mild symptoms of just a regular cold. He did the right thing. He self-isolated for 14 days and he went back to normal, and all his family members are fine too. So if you follow the instructions,
and did he test positive?
No, he was not sent for testing.
Okay.
He called in, he explained his symptoms, and we gave him the guidelines as to what to watch out for in terms of criteria for testing. He didn't develop any of those. We followed up with him at the end of the 14-day period and found out that he was back to normal. He had just some symptoms of what we already talked about, no fever. He had just mild symptoms of cough, runny nose. Those were the only symptoms. But since he had come back from travel, he quarantined automatically, and then he developed the symptoms kind of midway through the quarantine. So then he self-isolated and he called us for guidance. And we said, after going through all the criteria, that it was good enough that he self-isolated at home and monitored. And then it resolved, and his family members are okay too.
Right. Okay, good. So if you've got the symptoms and you have trouble breathing and you get hospitalized, what ends up happening there? I've seen these pictures of people in hospital beds with these huge respirators on them. Is that
It's not for everybody, and it really depends on a case-by-case basis. It all depends on your underlying immune system. And unfortunately, it is the older people who have a worse immune system, or those.
Why? It's lower with age?
Yeah, our immune system does get lower with age in terms of its ability to fight infections. that's a lot of older people are not probably able to maintain a healthy lifestyle, which also kind of lowers the immune system. And when I meant healthier lifestyle, this applies to everyone with any kind of illness. If you can build a good immune system with having to eat a healthy diet, exercise regularly, get enough sleep, keep your mental stress down, then you already have kind of a natural immunity that you have within yourself. Then the other factors come in, whether you, it depends on your age, whether you have some kind of underlying medical conditions that might take away from that. But if your basic lifestyle can be maintained in a healthier way, at least your natural immune system will be better.
Those are great suggestions for every day of life, not just for COVID-19. So what are they again? It's eat right, exercise, sleep, keep your mental health in check. Is that it? Was there another one?
Yes, those are the main ones.
Excellent. Yeah. We're going to take a break and come back with Dr. Amitha with some more comments. I'm going to ask her about some of these rumors in a minute. So stay with us on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Stay with us.
I'm also going to just grab the water. Listen to my water here.
Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're talking with, and I'm going to try to get this name right, I apologize, Dr. Amitha
Mundenchira.
Mundenchira. I apologize. I've really got to become better with pronunciation. I apologize. Who I've had the pleasure of interviewing in regards to her musical career, which is a fascinating sideline for a physician to have, but is also a general practitioner physician, and has been kind enough to be talking to us tonight about COVID-19, the coronavirus, and symptoms and risk factors and what happens. And now I'd like to ask you about some of the sort of the treatments and rumors. So first of all, President Donald Trump's been talking about some malaria medicine that's potentially the solution. Are there medicines that are currently approved for COVID-19?
Unfortunately, not yet. And the key word, Brian, is potential. Yes, there are every world class researcher is working on these potential medicines that may help. But at this point, we don't have any confirmed, well-studied drugs that are safe for humans to use against COVID-19.
Coquelin or something like this for malaria?
Chloroquine, that's what, the chloroquine, azathioprine, there's a few of them that has been circulating in terms of names around the net, but unfortunately right now there's nothing.
Would you be prescribing chloroquine?
No, I would not be, because there is not enough data. It's a very potent medication that can have serious side effects for the human body, and absolutely not when there's not proper evidence to suggest that it will help. Right now, the only evidence that we have in terms of protecting against COVID-19 is the simple measures we can take about sanitizing, cleaning surfaces, social distancing. Other than that, we do not have proof of anything else that really helps.
Someone sent me something that said you got to have a glass of hot water and 4 lemons every morning because the alkalinity of the lemons kills the virus.
I mean, it's a good practice to have in general, but unfortunately, we have no proof that it helps against COVID-19. But hey, it may keep you stress-free, and there's no harm doing it, but it's not going to help you against COVID-19.
Okay, someone else told me that saunas are the solution because the virus gets killed in the hot air. So get into a sauna.
No, once again, there is no evidence for that. And this virus is so new to us. We have seen the virus even in countries that have warmer temperatures. So right now, no, there's no evidence for that.
And there was another thing going around on Facebook that had a hand dryer positioned to your nose. A hand dryer on hot.
No. That's quite interesting, but no, there's no evidence for that either.
It's got to be crazy to probably burn yourself with a hand dryer going up your, well, never mind.
Yes, yeah, no, it's, I mean, in a dire need of solutions, I think people come up with something that they can logically think about. understand that. But with all the cases we have seen thus far, there's no evidence that that's going to help.
I had an emergency preparedness gentleman who asked about the sun. He said if that was the case, they'd be building tons of saunas in Italy rather than tons of hospital beds and ordering ventilators. So I agree.
Well said. Yeah.
What other rumors have you heard about how to deal with COVID-19?
So the most common I've heard is the one about drinking the hot water with the lemon. I've had some spiritual people who have been talking about vibration therapy, where chant, you chant, and the vibration actually gets rid of the virus.
And what is it you're chanting?
So it depends on what your language is, but yeah. So depending on the language, as long as it has a repetition to it, so it eventually catches up to a resonance and causes body vibrations. I've heard somebody mention that could take away the virus and destroy it.
Okay, and you obviously don't believe in that one either.
I don't believe in it destroying the virus, but hey, once again, if it helps you bring peace, given we are bombarded with so much information these days, and especially if you're self-isolating at home, it can get stressful. Yeah. So if this is going to help reduce some of that stress through meditation, why not? Okay. But again, it's not going to take away COVID-19.
So I've also heard lots of vitamin C and lots of vitamin D.
And not for COVID-19, we have no evidence for that. Once again, it comes back to it's okay to take them to boost your immune system, but that should not be a substitute for the things we already know, which is sanitize, clean, social distancing.
Okay, and then I heard something that if you've got some of the symptoms, take Tylenol, acetaminophen, but don't take ibuprofen.
We have no medical evidence for that. In terms of there has been, they are looking into it in terms of studies. So right now, I would not recommend against taking Advil in someone who has fevers, aches, and pains, if that's the only thing that would bring their fever down. Because other than COVID-19, as we talked about, this is a season of regular cold, coughs, and those will also mount temperatures. Right. In those cases, if we can keep the fever down, it's very important, especially in children. So I'm not recommending against taking anything that's ibuprofen or related. So there's no evidence right now for that.
Okay. Any other rumors that you've heard?
Pretty much there's the ones that you talked about and the one spiritual one that I talked about.
Okay, so let me ask you a couple of questions about the statistics. So there was an article last Sunday in the Ottawa Citizen quoting the head of public health for Ottawa, and Ottawa at the time had 49 confirmed cases. And he said he thought that there were actually 4,000 cases. And he said the reason why was, number one, the 49 were, as you said, a couple of days old because you hadn't had the test results in. And then second of all, he thought that because of all of the people that hadn't got tested or that were self-isolating or quarantine or didn't even exhibit any symptoms. And he had done that based on the 49 and whatever the numbers were, the 49 times the couple generations of transmission, and came up with 4,000. Does that make any sense to you that the reported number would be 49 and the head of public health is actually thinking it's not 10 times bigger, but 1,000 times bigger? Not 1,000, 100 times bigger.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I do not have the answer to that, because it is definitely, I do agree that the number of actual COVID-19 cases is much more than what is currently being reported. But in terms of how much more, I'm not actually sure, because as we talked about, there are many who are not getting tested because simply it being that they have mild symptoms. So in cases like that, it might be more dangerous for them to have to go to a assessment center and getting exposed to COVID-19 when really they don't have COVID-19. As you mentioned, there have been a lot of cases that have come back negative. So we're really taking caution as to who really needs to get tested. So we really don't know as to how many there are really. But in the end, again, it comes down to how do we control this curve? Because if we can keep the slope of the curve flatter, instead of steep, there'll be enough time for our healthcare system to catch up in terms of not just recovery for themselves, but also getting people tested, getting people treated, so that we see lesser number of cases over time. The burden on the healthcare system is less, and it is manageable within a short period of time rather than it getting spread over months,
Okay.
hopefully not months. Yeah.
I understand that and I agree with it, but let me challenge you just, and frankly, I don't believe this challenge, but let me just challenge you for the argument.
Yes.
It's an argument that I've heard. You know, some of the experts are saying that between 40 and 70% of the population will ultimately get infected with COVID-19. Whether we flatten the curve or spike the curve, the infection's going to get. And so all we're really doing is allowing the healthcare system to be dealing with it appropriately, because if we had a peak, that we wouldn't. And so, you know, some people suggested then the best thing to do is to go out and get infected, become immune, and then you can go back to work.
I do not believe in that, agreeing in, to that in this case. That refers to something, a term that is sometimes used as herd immunity.
Yep.
Where, you know, if most of the people become immune to an illness, the few that are around, those immune people will be protected, and then business will go on as usual. We do not know enough about this virus at this time to be able to recommend that kind of a solution to the problem we have at hand, because this is a virus that is very infectious and can get deadly very quickly. So we don't have that luxury where people go out and get like you talk about like chickenpox parties in the past, where, you know, one person gets it, let's all have it together and get it over with. This virus acts in a very infectious and in a very progressive fashion. It actually probably will end up doing more damage than than lessening the reservoir, you know, the people who are passing on the infection.
Okay, but let's just stay with this discussion for a minute. So chickenpox was similar. Chickenpox, from my understanding, you're the expert, not I, but chickenpox is not terribly harmful for children, but can be very harmful for adults. And so therefore the idea being, get it, you know, this is before the vaccination, I presume, but get the chickenpox when you're young, and so that you're immune to it when you're older, and just make sure that you don't pass it on to your elderly parents or grandparents. Hopefully they already had it, and so they're immune. And so people did have these chickenpox parties. Isn't that sort of the same situation where right now it appears that, you know, based on the statistics I've seen, not one person less than 9 has died in the whole world. So it's almost as if you're immune if you're really young. And then, you know, 20% of all the people that are above 80 that get it pass away, regrettably. And so this is something that we for sure have to keep away from the elderly. But it appears that, you know, if you're a young person under the age of 9, and or the number between, you know, 9 and 18 is similarly not 0, but pretty low. You know, if you get the virus and you then become immune, it would be helpful to actually get it. And then you can go on with your regular life. Just don't go close to granny or grandpa.
Yeah, but again, the thing is, we still don't know that about this virus. So right now we are assuming once you get it, if you recover from it, you will become immune to it. But we still don't know whether you can get reinfected with it. Right. With all the, we look at different viruses over time, probably you will be immune and not get it again. But there are cases where people, for example, again, since we talked about chickenpox, if we go back to it, there are people who have gotten it more than once.
Really?
Yes. So it's not like 100% guarantee that you would not get it again. That's number one. Second, this virus, yes, we have not really heard about cases of severity in kids. Having said that, the hometown where I come from in India, there has been one child death related to COVID-19. But that could have been due to lack of medical care or lack of recognition early on. So the numbers may be low, but it's not 0. Even for the young people, again, the statistics that we have, there's a lot in the news about the deaths mainly being older people, but there have been severe cases in younger people reported around the world too. Not
What?
necessarily deaths, yeah.
Why is mortality for females half of the mortality for males?
Right now, no answer for it because we are still studying the virus, but they're about half and half, like males and females. But
No,
I do not,
males are twice the mortality with males is almost twice the mortality of females.
I can only speculate whether it's related to lifestyle, whether it has to do with lifestyle. That's just a speculation. It's not
So,
probably
so
the truth.
on average, you guys are healthier than me. I figured you're going to say that the females are the stronger sex.
I differ from commenting.
So it also the age difference, and we've talked about that a fair amount, is astounding. You go from something that's zero under the age of 9 to something that's less than a percentage up until above 20, and then gets above 20% mortality for people above 80. So it really is
Mhm.
a very steep curve in that regard. The other thing that I found really quite shocking, and this is obviously one of the reasons why people are taking it so seriously, is that the mortality rate for the flu is like less than 0.1%. So less than 1/10 of 1% of the people that get the flu um, 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 uh, pass away from it, even though I think the number was something like 3 or 5,000 people that passed away from the flu in the past year in Canada. So even while a lot of us get the flu, it's such a small percentage, it still adds up to a big
Mhm.
number. And this, on average, is between 2 and 4%. So
Mhm.
it's, order of magnitudes more lethal than the flu.
But now we also know more about the flu. It's been around for ages. We have a vaccine for it. So over time, we have been able to control, recognize it better, treat it earlier on. The coronavirus is new to us. So we still have a lot of data to gather to be able to fight it better. Prevention, we have some measures we already talked about. There is working on the vaccine for it. So I think once we have a better understanding of how this virus works long term, because we have only a few months right now, and that too into the winter season, is this going to be a seasonal thing? Is it going to be year round? Honestly, we have no answers right now.
Right?
All we can do is take it,
Do you
on a day by day basis, learn more about it.
do you think it'll go away this summer like the flu does?
It's hard to know, but the more measures we put into place, there's a higher likelihood.
And how
The
long?
more measures in terms of control.
Right. And how long do you think until we get a vaccine?
Vaccines can take a while, but if you've not already heard, it's been expedited where it has already started in terms of human trial. In a lot of the vaccines, it takes years before it gets to human trial, but it has already been started in human trials. So I won't be able to give you a period as to when the vaccine will be out, but I would say it would be faster than some of the other vaccines that have come out in the last couple of years.
Well, you've been extremely helpful and very factual and articulate in your answers. I told you I was going to ask you as many questions that I could think about in regards to what people might be concerned about and rumors. Are there questions that you've heard that I haven't asked you today that you think people might like to know the answers to?
So the number one thing that every person asks is about the symptoms. And I just wanted to, again, just emphasize, if you have symptoms which include fever, cough, trouble breathing, self-isolate and call your local public health unit for further instructions as to whether you need to get tested. Don't panic, self-isolate and call your public health.
Well, Dr. Amitha, well, I'm not even going to try.
Mundenchira, that's okay.
Dr. Amitha Mundenchira, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to, on behalf of on everyone listening, and hopefully you, on behalf of everyone that is a healthcare practitioner accepting, express to you and to all of your peers our thanks for the work that you're doing. I think that we recognize how important our doctors and our nurses and our emergency personnel and our paramedics and our public health are day in and day out, but probably not as much as we need to. And we've certainly realized how essential you are to us in this pandemic, and the fact that number one, I know that you've actually seen some patients that were worried about COVID-19, that you were worried yourself, and that you're still coming to work day in and day out, and you're still wanting to chat with people and provide advice and appearing on my show to get the word out. Number one, I appreciate. Number two, I'm sure everyone that has the opportunity to hear you will appreciate you. And so please, on behalf of all of your peers, take our thanks for all the hard work that you do, and the fact that you're putting your own health at risk, getting out there and helping others. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I must say, we are all in this together, and we will all play our parts and we'll come out victorious. So just stay patient and we will get through this.
Thank you so much. And maybe you'll come back in a week or something and we'll do a phone in and answer some more questions.
Yes, new information always. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Stay with us, and we're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM News Talk Radio. Well, that was a fascinating evening chatting with Dr. Amitha. I'm not going to try to pronounce her name. I apologize. I'm so bad at that. But she was very frank, very honest, very articulate, very open, answered all the questions I asked, and I went and canvassed a bunch of other people to get some other questions. And I think that the advice that she provides is very helpful and healthy too. That we should be, number one, physically distancing ourselves from other people, not social distancing, because we got to stay in contact. And the fact that we had this wonderful chat via internet was helpful, though her picture was far better than mine. So my computer's got a problem I think I need to fix. And I think we are social animals, as we've talked about before, and so therefore we need to interact with people. We need to reach out. We need to not touch them, but chat with them and see them. And so with FaceTime, with Zoom, with Skype, with video conferencing, all those kinds of things, and texting and emailing and telephone calling, we can stay in touch with people. And so don't socially isolate, don't socially distance, but physically isolate and physically distance in this time, so we can flatten the curve and ensure that we don't infect too many people, if anybody. The second thing that we talked about is all of the risk factors and the symptoms. And what she said, and we said during a break when we weren't on recording, is that if you've got these symptoms, unless they're really bad, don't put yourself at risk. Stay home, get rid of the symptoms, because until and unless you've got trouble breathing, there's not a lot that the healthcare system is going to do for you, because we are treating the symptoms. We're not treating the virus until and unless you're on a respirator or maybe getting some of these drugs, these experimental drugs that people are talking about. And I think the final comment that she made, which was very hopeful, is that we will get over this, whether it's the heat of the summer or whether it is a vaccine or whether it's just the fact that we've been successful in isolating. To hear it again from a physician that is at the front lines, we are going to get through this. This is a once in a century. It was well, not really, because we've had Ebola, we've had H1N1, we've had lots of other SARS and 15 years ago, but nothing's been this bad since, frankly, 1919 in the Spanish flu. And so whether it's once a decade with the SARS 15 years ago, or whether it's once in a century with Spanish flu a century ago, this is not something that happens every year. It's not the seasonal flu. So it's something that is going to be a test for us, and we're going to have to get through it. And the way to get through it is by physically distancing. And I've seen the jokes on Facebook. Our grandfathers, our grandparents were asked to go to war, and we're asked to stay home and sit on our couch and watch TV. We can do this. Stay healthy, everybody. Good night.